Okay, today on the podcast, I've got a great guest, a very interesting one, something a little bit different, and we like to go into the world of horror as well. So, what better guest to have than the first ever Jason Voorhees, Mr. Ari Lehman? How are you doing, sir?
I am doing fantastic, and I'm super happy to be here today, all the way here from Camp Crystal Lake. As you know, the very first Jason Vourhees. Of course, I played the boy in the lake. I want to get that established for everybody. I don't want to lay claim to being the big Jason, but I am the first Jason, and we'll discuss which is more important, of course.
Yeah.
As we go along.
It's obviously a long time ago, like when you done that movie and it was in your childhood. But do you remember anything leading up to getting that role?
Oh yes. Well, I remember it all. Cheap. Thank you. Is that how you call yourself Cheap, or how do you do that?
You can call me Cheap Heat, or you can call me Morris. Morris is my name. You could call me Morris.
Morris. Right on. Whichever you prefer. Morris. Yeah. Well, when he was very young, I lived in Westport, Connecticut, which also was where Sean Cunningham, the director, had his production company established. Now, he was originally doing a film about soccer, okay, or as you call it, football overseas. And I was just a kid, and I was into acting. Now, he had done a film prior to that about baseball, which is kind of a knockoff of the Bad News Bears. And so that was called Here Come the Tigers. And so some of my friends were in that movie, and they said to me, come out to the YMCA in Westport because Sean is going to be doing a new movie about soccer. And we know you love acting and you love to play soccer. And, and I was kind of like, I guess if you all remember the Partridge Family over there was like Danny Partridge, Danny Bonaducci. He was like the freckle-faced, kind of chubby, red-haired kid, So I was kind of like that, not exactly, but a little bit. And so I snuck into this audition, Morris. I snuck in as a little boy, which people shouldn't do, of course, but it was at the YMCA, so it was totally safe. But my parents didn't do anything. And they handed me a script, and I landed an 80-line role because they just felt that I matched the character of Roger, who was the girl-obsessed little boy who was kind of, always trying to sneak a peek into the girls' showers, et cetera, et cetera. So, now that movie is a really great film. And I encourage anyone who's a Friday the 13th fan to check it out. It's called Manny's Orphans. It's also sometimes called Kick. And the reason I say that is because there's many people who were in Friday the 13th who are in that movie. And there's many people like Irwin Keyes, for instance. If you're a Friday the 13th fan, you should know Irwin Keyes, who is just the coolest person. And that's evinced by all the work that he's done for Mr. Rob Zombie in Rob Zombie's movies and in Rob Zombie's videos. Irwin Keyes, now for Friday the 13th fans, if you remember when Annie, at the beginning of the film, she goes into the diner and there's this big kind of guy and he's sweeping up the diner, and he turns around and he's got a very, he's a physically imposed, so it's kind of like, intimidating, look on purpose because they're trying to misdirect us, of course. And but that's Irwin Keyes. So Irwin Keyes was also in this movie, Manny's Orphans, and he plays like the bodyguard. He plays this bodyguard complete with like the full mafia outfit with the hat and everything. And he looked sharp, man. He looked amazing. Now, the reason I speak this way, of course, because we've lost Irwin. He got his wings, man. And but what a wonderful guy. He would hang out with me on the set because there's a lot of time in between. You're just hanging out, and but we couldn't hang out in the buildings where they were working on stuff. So we would hang out in this pickup truck, and they would play 8-track tapes. Now, I know that's before your time, but these 8-track tapes, they had cassettes, and then we had 8-track tapes, which were these giant things, and you put them in there. And the only drawback with 8-track tapes, of course, as your older fans will remember, is that at some random point in the song, they change. You're listening, you're like, and she's buying a click stare, it clicks to the next. So anyway, we were sitting there and they would play these I remember they played for me Patti Smith and the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, and because it was that time period, it was punk. But so I was in that movie, and I had a lot of fun being in that movie. But then it was like, okay, crickets, because I guess football not being very popular in America at that time, 1979, there was no soccer moms. Maybe today if it was made, and I think they did a kind of Will Ferrell kind of did a take on that movie more recently. It's about a down and out guy who finds his way, and a girl, of course, by coaching a ragtag bunch of orphans who win their orphanage back from the mob in a soccer tournament. So that was fun. And honestly, to give you some insight about Sean, because when we talk about Friday the 13th, you really got to think about Sean Cunningham. And Sean Cunningham, an Irishman, I think, with a name like Sean Cunningham.
With a name like that, yeah.
And but a wonderful director, really works well with kids. A lot of his movies had young people in them, and he had a good way of getting everybody to be relaxed and natural. And he never raised his voice on the set, but he was very firm. Like, you knew what he wanted, but he, and if he wanted you to do something, he would take you aside and just tell you very, very effectively. He was really, really cool. So he calls me up one day. In other words, how I got into Friday the 13th itself. He calls me up one day and he says, well, we've got another movie. We want you to be in this other movie, and I'm like, sure, Sean, what's up, man? And he's like, well, this one's a horror movie. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Okay, great. And he goes, can you swim? And I'm like, yeah, I can swim, man. He's like, okay, you got the part. Come on down to the studio. But he wasn't at the studio when I got there. It was his secretary was there. She hands me a script. Now, mind you, I had played the little girl-obsessed character, little boy. Now, I read the script. It said, and, they had highlighted certain lines. And it said, the character goes with the girl into the woods and they start making out, and I was like, oh, boy, this is great. Yes, because I was 14, I was like, wow, this is amazing. No, and then in comes Sean Cunningham, and he looks at, first he sees the look on my face, and he knew something was up. He's like, why does Ari look like that? Because, so then he says to me, and then he goes, wait. And he took the script. He goes, no, that's Kevin Bacon's script for the Kevin Bacon character who goes off, and I thought, because the first thing you do as an actor is you count your lines. So of course, in Annie's Orphans, I had 80 lines. I said, wow, but then, okay, so then he handed me this other script and there was like 100 something lines. I was like, this is amazing. But then, no. He handed me my script. And I'm going through the script, looking for my lines. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, wait, I'm not even in this movie till the end. And I have no lines. And I said, Sean looks at me. Now he's funny. So he sits me down again. He goes, Ari, you are the monster. And then I went, oh, okay, I get to be the monster. Cool. So, especially being that age, I was happy with that. It was fun. And so yeah, that got me more interested. And then immediately they said, okay, you're going to start working with the special effects people, Tom Savini and his assistant Tasso Stavrakis, who doesn't always get mentioned, but the scene where the hands are coming down like this at the end of after mom gets it, those are Tasso's hands. And because in the Blu-ray you can really tell that because he's a Greek guy of Greek descent who's blessed with very hairy hands.
Hairy tanned hands.
Yeah. They didn't bother to shave his hands, as you can see but yeah, so they really did make it a lot of fun for me. I'll say this, with all the special effects and the swimming and getting to grab Adrian and everything, for me, I had a ton of fun on the set of Friday the 13th. I was just having a good time. Of course, there was a lot of hard work, but that was part of the fun too. And then after that was done, everybody would just go swimming.
Isn't it amazing when you look back on films that are iconic, like Friday the 13th, Halloween, and films like that were made back then, for what they've done with the resources they had to still last the time is amazing. Like, because people still watch these movies. It's a credit to them.
You said a mouthful there. And if anything in my life that I've really drawn from it, of course, the top thing is meeting so many wonderful people who are so devoted to this character for whatever reason. But I would say in my own work as a band leader and other endeavors that I've done, when we were on the set of Friday the 13th, I observed Sean Cunningham and, of course, Tom Savini, and, of course, the director of photography, who rarely gets mentioned, Barry Abrams, and all of them, they worked on a shoestring budget, okay, and they made the most out of everything. First of all, they made the most out of the scenery, the lighting, and, I recently have been to Blairstown, which is the town, and also last August I was at Camp Crystal Lake, and it because of whatever reason, it has a very unique atmosphere, a very unique lighting, and they made the most out of that. And then, Tom, if you think about it, even like, okay, for example, the first scene where Annie gets her throat slit, where we're all waiting for the camera to turn away, and it doesn't turn away. And this did change a lot of things because, poor Annie, like, she's the sweetest gal in the movie, and she gets killed before the whole thing starts. But they literally shot that. Okay, she's in the woods there, and then, okay, like Tom said, okay, hold the camera position, and then they got on a motorcycle, drove back to the camp, did the makeup, put her back on the motorcycle, but boom, and just shot it. I mean, man, no trailers. These people were living in those cabins. There was no catering. They they were eating whatever we cooked, in the camp. So it was yes. But see, here's what I often wonder, Cheap, as maybe ironically here, because did not those budgetary constraints brought out the creativity, in my opinion.
Yes.
Because as you pointed out, there's movies that had higher budgets. My gosh, I'm not going to reel off all of these movies that even that same year or at other times, or I could give, for example, a movie that everyone has so much respect for that is well loved, but maybe not as well loved in the same way as The Shining. Of course, The Shining was made the same year as Friday the 13th, but of a totally different energy. And I think one of the things is that Friday the 13th, it was a female character. You had the mom, of course, is the antagonist, I guess, and then Alice Hardy, played by Adrienne King, the girl that I get to grab, she would be the protagonist. And and I think that was just apropos for the time period, having a woman be so important. But you picked out a crucial element is that they made the most out of it. And I found that very often when we see those limitations and we think, wow, I wish I had this huge budget and all this, but you know what, when you have enough and you get it done, that's, it'll make you more creative, I think.
Did you ever think that it would be as big as it is?
Well, not at that time at all, because once again, this was a film which we had felt was just kind of, okay, Sean really always wanted to do like romantic comedies, and especially films about young people. If you'll notice, his real big blockbuster was Spring Break, which is, a movie about kids, He had been successful with Last House on the Left with Wes Craven. And that's probably why, whatever political production machinations occurred. So he became a horror director, even though, but, what was the question? No, was it? I remember. So ultimately, no, we were all surprised. We thought, okay, this is a way he can cut his losses from the previous film and then move on, and who knows what he'll do next. No, so ultimately, now, here's another point. We're talking about Sean, so we might as well talk about this. He was underconfident in the results, and he sold the rights to the film, not the full rights, but, I guess the
percentage.
Yeah, his part to Steve Miner, the producer, for part one. Okay, and then by the time they got to part four, okay, Sean was back in because they saw, wow, this is going somewhere. It wasn't really until somebody walked up to me at school and went, and I was like, what? And they said, aren't you the kid? I said, yeah, but who was just talking about this the other day? I think it was Tony Moran, who played Michael Myers in one of his many manifestations. But he said back then you didn't brag about being in a horror movie because, he said there was like porn, softcore porn, and then horror. So
yeah,
you wouldn't tell people about it. So no, and then it wasn't until part three when the hockey mask, made its appearance. With really, it was Larry Zerner's character, Shelley, the chubby kid, Larry's not chubby anymore, but back then. And, he had the mask. And then, Richard Brooker, who was a great Jason and a great person. From his family was British, although I believe he was born in England, but I think he grew up in South Africa.
Okay.
And yeah, he was an amazing person. And so really, in a lot of ways, it's part 3 where things really start becoming Friday the 13th with Hockey Mask Jason and, all of that. That it was right around that time that I realized, oh, okay, this is something, this character, people are gonna, and then part 4, of course, they put a lot of advertising money into it. So by that point, I was like, yes, I've created a monster. But I thought it was interesting. Okay, they used all the footage I did in part 1, they used in parts 2 and 4, but not 3. So in parts 2 and 1, 2, and 4 contain all the vast seconds of time that I can lay claim to. But I often say jokingly to the other Jasons, like the great Kane Hodder, who was in Dublin the time I was in Dublin. And there's a famous story about that.
I heard about that, but I have Dublin on my list. We'll get into Dublin in a while.
Stories. We'll get to that another. We don't maybe we'll just say there's I can tell them. But the point being that Kane, I often say to him, Kane, he's like, oh, you were just in the movie for 30 seconds or whatever. That could be an exaggeration. But I said to him, yes, but if you look at the number of people that I scared effectively in the short length of time, then per capita, I have, probably the
more scares.
Yes, more than anybody. I'm up there with Karloff and the greats, in terms of seconds.
Isn't it amazing that the backing that the horror community gets from the general public? Like, it's not something that you get, say, in comedy. Like, I'm talking about conventions, like you mentioned, and we'll talk about when you came to Dublin. And like the story I tell people about that is, which is unfortunate from my point of view, I was living in Dublin at that time. I was living in Dublin for 6 years.
Yeah.
And I did not know about the event until about 4 years after it had passed.
Oh,
and I couldn't believe it. So I recently got in touch with the promoters, and I basically just told them the story that I was talking to another guy over here that's a horror writer, and he was involved in some of the promotion and things like that. And I said to him, I did not know that this event existed, because of course I would have been there. See yourself and Kane Hodder and Alex Vincent, which I like from Child's Play as well.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know. So how did you get on in Dublin? You've got a good story, have you?
Well, no, we had a great time in Dublin, and all kinds of wild stuff happened. I remember now his name, Conor McGregor, the fighter. That's his name, right?
Yeah.
So he allowed Kane to use his gym, and so we had gone over there, and all kinds of. It was a great event, parallel, and I got asked to come down to a recording studio and do a special solo piano version of of 2 of my songs at a famous recording studio in Dublin. I wish I could remember the name offhand, but I guess a lot of big bands had recorded. So in general, it was a blast. I got to go to the Guinness Brewery and to to that beautiful, the bar that's on top and looking out over Dublin. And I often say to Americans, I mean, of course, right now it's kind of out of the question, but I always say to Americans, when they ask me, oh, where's a good place to go? I say, you know what, a very accessible and fun place to go is Dublin and Ireland in general. The Book of Kells, all that stuff, man. I saw the harp of Brian Boru, and oh man, forget it. I mean, it's just I had such a wonderful time, and then just meeting the fans there, and they're very just the warm welcome, and just you just instantly feel at home. Of course, one of the most remarkable people that I met over there, the magician, Steve Spade, the Houdini of Ireland, who's a good friend of mine and an amazing person. And I'm sure many of your listeners know about Steve Spade, but if you don't, you got to check him out. And he was there the whole time at this event, and in the hotel, while we were all just there in the bar and everybody's eating and drinking, and he's doing all his tricks where he throws the cards up on the ceiling and your card sticks there with like the name of your dog written on it. And you're like, how did that happen? And no. And then later on, not too long ago, he was doing things online. So he read my mind online, which was, it was amazing. Okay. Let me tell you, Morris, what he did. Okay.
Yeah.
We're always, bantering about online. Oh, hey, cool. Thumbs up this. And he's like, hey, how you doing? So he goes, okay, I'm going to do a thing online. We're going to do a thing online together. Okay. Where I'm going to try to do I think he said a mentalist illusion or something like that. So I'm like, okay, cool. So he goes, okay. And this is the date we're going to do it on. So, and I was like, wow, okay. That's like, it was the day we were going on tour, but I knew that if he did it in the morning for me and it would work for you guys. Okay. So it was the craziest thing. He's like, I won't try to imitate his accent, but he says, all right, Ari, great to see you. And how's everything? And he goes, and I'm like, hey, Steve, great. We're all happy to see each other. And then he says, okay, so you had a dream. And I go, yeah. And he goes, you had a dream about a famous horror actor. And I went, what? And I went, because I had just had a dream. Okay.
Was it Freddy Krueger?
See, it wasn't. It would have been easy no, it was Vincent Price. Okay. And he says, this is the great. 2 nights before this happened, and I told my wife, I had a dream that I was backstage at a big theater. And I was about to go on stage, so I was all, nervous, and somebody was next to me talking to me, blah, 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 blah. So I could hear a band going on stage, before us, and that band was Black Sabbath. Okay. It was Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath was on stage. Okay. And I'm walking to go on stage because I'm like, I want to look from the side of the stage, to see Black Sabbath. Then all of a sudden to my left, I see these people are rehearsing a scene. They're rehearsing a scene. Okay. So I walk over in my dream now, and it's Vincent Price. And Vincent Price goes, Ari, so wonderful to see you. And he shakes my hand, And I was like, I didn't mean to interrupt. He's like, no, we're just going over this scene. And he's like, so-and-so, this is Ari. He played Jason and da-da-da. And then I look at the person who's standing next to me, and sure enough, okay, it's Steve Spade. in my dream. Okay.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it all comes back to me. He says to me, so rewind. Steve Spade says to me, so you had this dream about Vincent Price. And I just went, shut the front door. I was like, fuck you. I stood up. I was just cursing him. I said, how did you not? He goes, wait. It's more. And then he told me Black Sabbath was on stage. He told me the whole thing, the entire dream.
I think I need to talk to this guy at some point.
How did he do that, man? So I was so stunned, bro. You know, we're trying to figure out how all those details. Then he did another thing where he read my mind using a piece of paper. He said, okay, project an image, and he got that right. And so, you know, so I don't know, man. I think hats off to Steve Spade, the Irish magician. I said, I think because I always salute the wee people of Ireland, who I believe exist, of course, and exist all over the world, but maybe they're just super powerful there, and they leave them alone to do their thing. You know, don't cut these bushes and stuff like that. So, you know, I think he's friends with them or something. You know, I don't know, man. That was something else, bro. I tell you. Oh, that's my Steve Spade story.
In terms of like, when I talk to people that are involved in horror, and I could touch back on the community and the love from people and the conventions and things like that, it's like it's a part of your life, really, and that leads into the band you have as well. Like, do you want to talk to us about the story behind the band and what the songs represent?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and you hit on a good point there. The fans of Jason are the most devoted, wonderful fans, and it's without proportion to, you know, it doesn't. Sometimes it's uncanny how wonderful they are. I think we owe a lot of that to Betsy Palmer, who played Pamela Voorhees, of course, Mama Voorhees.
Yeah.
And what happened was, you know, even on the set of Friday the 13th, I was already a musician. And I had made my decision that I wanted to be a musician. And I was starting to study jazz piano. And ultimately, I found that as much as I loved, you know, movies and theater and all that, that I was more suited to be a musician. And and my teachers agreed, you know, I had a particular talent for playing the piano. So, and even people on the set of Friday the 13th championed that. Interestingly, they were like, I think that's a great decision, you know, which I think, you know, told me a lot too. They were maybe giving me warning about, you know, being a child actor, and it can be a bumpy ride on a lot of levels. So I definitely think I chose correctly, and I chose music. So now, after a professional, professional education, I mean, I got a scholarship. I ended up at New York University studying jazz piano because I wanted to be in New York to play jazz and listen to.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a dorm room where I could literally go downstairs at night. Literally downstairs, there were 7 different jazz clubs where I could hear the masters of jazz, because at that time they were still alive. I could hear Sir Roland Hanna. I could hear Hank Jones, Tommy Flanagan for the price of a beer down the street. And they used to always make fun of me because I would sit right by the piano and they're, you're going to finish your beer? I would like drink 1 beer all night, you know, like just, you know, everybody else is, you know, doing it. I would just watch the piano, you know. But I saw some amazing piano players there, and forget it. I mean, and not to mention saxophone players and bass players and everything. And all over, I got to go to the Village Vanguard, and so I was into jazz. But then what happened was, see, I have long hair, and then Kenny G came out. So people kind of started associating long hair guys like me with that kind of jazz. And I wasn't into that jazz. I was into like frenetic, new, edgy jazz, or, so, and I'd be like, no, I'm into this. And they're like, no, Kenny G. And I was like, oh, so eventually I started looking for different avenues. I started working in the world music scene, okay? World music. And that I eventually started working for Interscope Records. I even worked for Tough Gong Records, which was Bob Marley's label. I got to travel all over the United States and Europe, and I even got to travel to Africa. I became a member, like in the 90s, this was really big, African music, Caribbean music, Latin music. And it was big in over in Ireland and all over there. There's a lot of Irish world music acts that made it big. And so that was a big thing for a while. Okay. Then, of course, musical taste changed. And at that time, somebody sent me an email. This was the beginning of all that.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you autograph this photo? And suddenly I remembered, oh, yeah, I was Jason Vourhees. I said, well, no, I've never autographed a photo. And he said, oh, because I just bought this for $50 on eBay. And I went, what? So sure enough, someone had been forging my autograph and selling it on eBay way back then. But the upshot is, whoever that merchant was, I got them to refund people. They claimed they hadn't done it, whatever.
Yeah.
But it put the idea in my head, maybe I should check out these conventions. And I got invited by Fangoria magazine, as everybody knows about Fangoria.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to this big convention at the Meadowlands, okay, which is like this huge, football stadium. And there was thousands of people there. I met Kane Hodder, and I reunited with Tom Savini, who I hadn't seen in years. And I met Betsy Palmer, because I had never met her before that. Mm-hmm. And that's a great story in itself. Betsy, they had thousands of people there ready to meet us, but they said, okay, you guys go in this room over there. And I'm over here setting up, and I look over, and there's Betsy Palmer. And this will tell you about Betsy. She was the most amazing woman in the world. I just walk over to her, and I go, Mom. And she just, yeah. And she just gives me, but this is Betsy. She gives me this big hug. She just hugs me like, oh. And then she puts her hands on my shoulders and looks me right in the eye. Now, who the fuck are you? Like, I love you, but who the fuck are you? And I said, oh, and she goes, oh, we've never met. And she gave me another hug. And we became the best friends because she and I just hit it off. We just had so much fun. And I would bring her flowers. And we would go eat together because I'm a vegetarian. She's vegetarian. And so it was at that convention that, okay, I had brought my reggae world music CDs, and all these guys were like talking to me about, okay, I listen to your music, and, these big metalheads, and they're like, yeah, I'm not usually into reggae, but that's pretty good, So I thought to myself, maybe I should start doing metal. Now, this is 2000. Let me think now. It's like 2005, 4 or 5. It's like that long ago. So
yeah,
that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to do a metal band. First Jason. And, at first I started drawing upon influences that I had when I was in college, because I was buddies with, there's a band called Reagan Youth, and they were like a cutting edge punk band, and they were amazing. And I would hang out with Dave Insurgent, the singer from Reagan Youth, because he wanted to learn about jazz. Very intelligent guy. And so he wanted to learn about jazz. I wanted to learn about punk. We would go see the Bad Brains, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. And of course, I even saw White Zombie at that time. And I remember thinking, wow, this is the most amazing looking band I've ever seen in my life. That's when he had all the chicks in the band and everything. And, this is way back at CBGB's. So I started drawing upon that. I had help from two people at that point. There was a drummer from the Cro-Mags called Cleaver who helped me out. And there was also a bass player from a band called Macabre here in Chicago who helped me out a lot too, Nefarious. And that's a great, they just came out with a new album. That's Macabre. If there's any death metal fans out there, definitely check them out. It's called Carnival of Killers. That's their new album. But they are like the inventors of murder metal. So I had a lot of good advice, and I had a lot of good, if it wasn't for how open-minded and open-eared and open-hearted, the metal scene and the punk scene are, they gave me a lot of leeway to get my sound better. And I'm using a keytar. It was Nefarious who said, you need to bring in your keyboards. Because at first I was just singing. And we would do everything. I would do Misfits covers. I would do Danzig covers. I had this head of Pamela Voorhees, and I would sing, Mother, tell your children not to, we would do everything, So then, and it was Nefarious too, who said, throw all that out, bring in your keyboard somehow, and just do your originals, So I said, okay. But I didn't want to stand behind a keyboard. So I was thinking, and what I did was I found a cosplay sword from like the show Bleach, which is this big sword, the sword of the sky or something. And so I put a guitar strap on there and I duct taped my synthesizer to that thing. And I just made this like machete keytar. Okay. Then some really great group of people who did special effects for haunted houses approached me. They said, we're going to make you a guitar machete. So as time passed, that developed. Now I play a Roland, and, it's a synth axe that looks like a axe. So, things have progressed in the guitar area, but especially I finally landed my personnel here in Chicago, and that's with Eddie Machete, who's our guitar player, who has been, I've had the same personnel now for about 5 years, and that's Eddie Machete. He's a student of Joe Satriani, the guitar player, and then we have on drums Prince Fabian Arroyo, who's a Chicago scene drummer who plays in like 7 bands. And then similarly, our bass player is named Bass Amp. And yes, so there you go. We also have Johnny Danger, who because sometimes we have different subs, but currently, the touring makeup is myself, Eddie Machete, Bass Amp, and Fabian. We also did all our recordings over here at Uptown Recording, our best ones, our most recent ones. So when we came out with this one album, the first album was Jason Is Watching. People love that. More recently, we came out with Lord of the Lake, and we made a bunch of videos for that. There's the Vourhees is the name video, the Kill for Mother video people can check out. Then what happened was, I don't know, there's this band called Ice Nine Kills. Is that popular over there? Ice Nine Kills? Because they're very big. We get thousands of hits. They get millions of hits. So they asked me to sing on one of their songs about Friday the 13th. All their songs are about horror, to explain. But the lead singer of Ice Nine Kills wears a half Freddy, half Jason costume.
Okay.
And they do every horror franchise. They do a song about Michael. They do a song about Leatherface. They do a song about It. They do a song about Jaws. I mean, everything. They do a song about The Exorcist. So they had me sing on the acoustic version. No, you guys got to check them out over there. Ice Nine Kills. It's on the Silver Stream album. They had me do the acoustic version of their song, Thank God It's Friday. So that brought a lot of younger attention to first Jason. Thank you, Ice Nine Kills. And then the singer from Ice Nine Kills sang on one of my songs called The Scapegoat. And then we released another one called The Price of Peace. And, you know, we're just, we're really blessed because there's a great studio over here called Uptown Recording. And there's a thing called Nonpoint, which maybe some of your listeners have heard about. And they just finished an album right there. They're going to be releasing that album. So there's a lot of, you know, I think even though the quarantine has been a challenge, it's kept us from touring as much as we like to, but we haven't allowed that to slow us down. And we've been recording. And, you know, frankly, I'm kind of staying away from the musical live streams because usually the sound is,
people,
you know.
People are pissed off listening to live streams now.
The sound isn't good, man. It's like, yeah, there's my buddy. He's playing. It's like, But I will say this. We did get one where this one person who does sound at a big club, but they were closed. So he brought his whole sound system and he must have taken 2 or 3 hours to set it up. But that one, it did sound really good. And it got so much response on Facebook that Facebook shut it down. They're like, 100K, stop. But, you know, I think the most important thing, too, is to remember all of those venues out there that they're owned by those mom and pops and families out there, and they're counting on the bands. They're counting on those beer sales. They're counting on you to come in and support them. And we've always been counted on them to tour and go throughout the country. They're there for me. So I've been trying my best. We kept touring in March and October, and we're going out next month. And but it is starting to pick up again. How's it going on in Ireland? Are the venues opening up again?
Everything is closed. Our pubs are opening on June 7th again.
Okay.
Thank God we can go for pints. Only outdoor dining for the start. But
I can't imagine Ireland without pubs.
Yeah, it's been about a year now anyway. But you're getting back on the road soon. And listen, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you today, man. And best of luck with the music. And best of luck in the conventions.
Thank you. I hope we can get over to Ireland soon. Okay.
I hope so. And I'll be there this time. I'm going to keep an eye. I'm going to make sure I'm there this time.
Absolutely. Say hello to all the wee people. And remember, Jason never dies.
Cheers, man.
Take care.